736. KFI AM 640, more stimulating talk radio. Handel here. Now, a story that is, of course, caused some controversy, and this one is about art. And it's about photos that depict little kids showing horrific events that are, in fact, they're set-up photos, obviously. There's nothing candid about these. It's an exhibit called In the Playroom. And children reenact historical events like the 9/11 attacks, the abuse of inmates at Abu Ghraib, the death of Princess Diana, the death of John Benet Ramsey, the Jonestown Massacre, Hurricane Katrina. Jonathan Hobin is a Canadian artist who did this. He's a photographer. And he says his work is an attempt to reflect on modern events that affect children and prompt dialogue about issues in our world. The exhibit was first released in Canada in late 2010, but the photos are just now getting attention here in the U.S. And we have a link to those photos, and you really do want to see these. And I'd like your opinion on these, or we would like your opinion. We have a poll going. And again, I'm willing to guess that I'm going to be on the other side of the poll numbers, because I am going to defend these. Not because I think they're wonderful and terrific and they make me think. It really makes me think. No, it's because you define art. Try to figure out what is art and when does it stop and where does it start. I can't. Total, there are 12 images. You can go to KFIAM640.com, keyword Handel, and not only see the photos, but also we have that poll. For example, one photo called The Twins shows two young boys staring directly in the camera in a playroom, and the entire playroom is designed to look like the scene from the 9/11 attacks at the World Trade Center in New York. One boy is shown holding a toy plane going into, I think it's Legos of the World Trade Center, and you can see the hole and the way it's been attacked, and the kid's holding the toy plane. The other kid holds a toy fire engine crane in front of the building, which is made to look like it is on fire. Another image called a Boo Grave, B-O-O, grave, G-R-A-V-E, shows a hooded kid on a box with the electrodes, the phony ones, attached to his fingers. Remember that iconic photo? There were two of them that they had. This one was the prisoner in the hood on that box, looked like a milk crate, where the electrodes were attached. So in this photo, there's the boy who is in that hood with his hands outstretched. Next to him is a near-naked boy handcuffed beside a stuffed animal of a dog. Remember the dog's attacking the prisoner? He's screaming as if he's being attacked by the dog. There's also a little girl dressed in military garb on one side of a hooded prisoner who's smiling and pointing to the prisoner with a cigarette in her mouth. Familiar? Now, Hobin says on his website that this playroom exhibit is, quote, a metaphor for the impossibility of a protective space safe from the reach of modern media. I think that's a legitimate claim in terms of art. Why not? He goes, there's the metaphor, and I've taken kids, and how have I hurt the kids? Effectively. And he says the quizzical disposition of the youth, I don't know how quizzical they are, and the nature of the media, and then he goes on, are symbolically represented in my images. Yeah, he's trying to obviously rationalize this in his own head, but I think it's not even a rationalization. I think it's the way he thinks. And he goes, just as kids make a game pretending to be adults as a way to prepare and ultimately take on these roles later in life, what, as terrorists? So they explore things they hear and see, even though they don't understand it. And Hobin said that the parents who allowed those kids have, of course, received all kinds of criticism that kids are being exploited. And he says these exhibits were not only shot, but were also exhibited with the approval of the kids' parents. And the argument is, how can you do that to kids? You know, how can you do that to your kids? Well, you have a lot of say in what happens to your kids. in the Army. What are you going to say? These kids are going to be traumatized for the rest of their lives? Maybe they're going to be proud of the fact that they were part of an exhibit that showed to the world the nature of the media. But Hobin, of course, has been accused of crossing an ethical boundary. And you've got psychiatrists who are saying, oh, come on, stop it, and look what you're doing. There's a photograph of a young girl depicted as John Benet Ramsey. And it portrays a girl standing in her bedroom surrounded by photos of herself as John Benet. She's dressed in a beauty pageant dress and a crown and heavily made up. And she's holding up a scarf around her neck as if she's being strangled. And the image shows the girl's panties around her ankle. And Hobin defended his work. Here's Hobin talking about it on CNN.
First of all, a lot of my work has to do with issues that affect children, and I felt that it was an appropriate time to actually stop and reflect some of the issues that actually exist in our world that are reflected in children's play. I don't think it's as literal as I've chosen to make it, but I just wanted to acknowledge what it is in the world that kids actually do see, and to acknowledge the fact that media is so pervasive that it's almost inescapable at this point. This is a part of our culture, and we have to acknowledge it.
All right, when we come back, we'll give more quotes of what Hobin had to say in defending these photos. Again, if you want to see the photos, and that'll help you really get into this story, and we're taking a poll on what you think, go to KFIAM640.com. The keyword is Handel, and you'll see these photos that I'm talking about. Offensive? Oh, God, yes. Should be removed? I don't think so. Is it art? I think so. Matter of fact, when we come back also, I'm going to give you another definition of art, and you're going to remember this one, and offensive beyond words, especially the day after Easter. 744, KFI AM 640, more stimulating talk radio. 751, KFI AM 640, more stimulating talk radio. Bill Handel. And welcome back on April 25th, Monday. Bill Carroll. Good morning, Bill.
Good morning.
All right. What are you going to talk about today at noon?
Well, I've just been looking at Governor Brown's new state budget in January, and he projected saving $500 million in employees' take-home pay, and how much he missed that. And what's really interesting, Bill, is the excuse he made for it, which I'm going to save till noon.
You got it. That's today at noon. Bill Carroll. Now, we go back to the series of photographs that were released by this photographer, I guess artist, John Hobin, Canadian artist, depicting little kids portraying horrific events. The 9/11 attacks and set up with Legos. I mean, you can see easily the analogy, or actually the depiction, the actual depiction, one of John Benet Ramsey, I said, and it depicts a little girl hanging and being murdered. I mean, it's just really offensive stuff. And
is the question whether it's art or not, Bill?
Yes,
because
it's a question of
I'm looking at them, it just makes me feel really uncomfortable.
Oh, they're very uncomfortable.
They're just disquieting as hell.
But in many cases, that's exactly what the artists want. For example, let me give you an example, which was hugely controversial. And that was, if you remember the photograph that Andre Serrano released a few years ago, which was a crucifix, a small crucifix with, crucifixes where you actually have not just the image, but a little carved Jesus on the cross, right? Is that, what do they call that, as opposed to just a cross? It's crucifix. Anyway, Jesus is carved and he's right there, and, his arms are out there on the cross. Anyway, what Serrano did is have a crucifix in a beaker that was filled with his own urine. And he delicately entitled that photograph Piss Christ, to, I guess, really offend people. So, was that art or not? Well, a lot of people said, no, I don't think that's art. Hugely controversial, but who's going to argue what art is or is not?
I think it's the use of the kids.
Yeah, well,
in this
I know.
Instance,
parents
you
said
still
yes.
want to think of innocence, you know, and you're seeing kids practically naked, in the Abu Ghraib, it just.
Yeah, but they aren't naked.
I feel like taking a shower after looking at
I
those,
understand that, but maybe that's exactly the point. And what Hobin says is the point of this is to make to bring an analogy, if you were, a depiction of what the media does and how it covers what these events are and the sensationalism, which of course is a legitimate complaint, and he's doing it through this to make you uncomfortable. Maybe that's the entire point. For example, the John Benet Ramsey depiction. Here's what Hobin says.
I think that any child putting something around their neck and kind of holding it up, they would get what that was about. I mean, kids play like that sort of stuff all the time. So she got it, but she didn't necessarily get the context of Jean Benet and that sort of reference. But I think that kids do understand a lot more than we want to acknowledge.
Now, keep in mind that the parents agreed to all of this. And you've got two issues going on. The kids may be traumatized, but there's lots of things that traumatize kids. You know, for example, a lot of people argue that corporal punishment is a horrible thing to do to any kid, and it's going to be it's going to traumatize the kids forever. And other people say it's the best thing in the world. And he says the little girl wasn't even affected by it.
The whole process was the child getting her hair and makeup done and playing dress up, and that was sort of her take of it in terms of the actual finished frame.
Yeah, he goes on to explain how, it's the parents were not only involved, but the parents are going to be involved in explaining to the kids what happened. Everybody may be incredibly proud of it. Matter of fact, the parents may think it's great. And these kids 15 years from now may very well say, you know what, I'm proud of what I did. It's the best thing that ever happened to me. Or, my God, look what they did to me, and they're talking to a therapist for the next 30 years. And you don't know, but it's the parents said okay. And he says he's not exploiting the kids at all, and he blames the American media for the controversy. Of course he does. We always blame the American media. Just like all these dictators are blaming the outside agitators for coming in and causing the revolutions. He said Canada definitely had people who criticized the work, but for the most part, the Canadian and European media took a pretty unobjective approach to the story, and the audience responded positively for the most part. Well, because Europe and Canada just look at it totally differently. For example, nudity is common in terms of even advertising. Of course, political correctness is insanity in those countries. Very strange what is allowed and not allowed. But the point is, you know what? Who am I to argue whether this is art or not? And it could very well be. I'm not going to be the arbiter of art, nor is any other individual. That's my point. So there's a poll. I'm going to vote in favor of these photographs, obviously, and you're probably going to vote in overwhelming numbers against these photographs in the sense that it exploits kids and it's the worst thing that ever happened. So we're doing the poll, and you have to see these photos, by the way. Go to KFIAM640.com, keyword Handel, and we have those on the website. And as Rich said, they're going to make you very uncomfortable. They're very disquieting. But does an artist have the right to do that?
So what's the poll question, then?
I don't know what the poll question is. Michelle brings it up.
I mean,
Michelle, what's the poll question?
Of whether it's art or not, or whether it's bad or not.
Disturbing or it's just art.
Is it art or are they disturbing? The problem is it could be both.
Right.
Well, but here's the problem, Michelle. I think it's both.
You got to choose one or the other.
Well, how about putting both? Can we add another one?
Add both.
Okay, add or both. Okay, and yeah, I think that works. And we're going to do that poll. We'll talk about a lot more. You know what? Let's talk about a far more disturbing story, in my opinion, that brutal McDonald's attack in Maryland and the video and what the victim had to say. 7:59, and who that victim is a whole story in and of itself. KFI AM 640, more stimulating talk radio.